You know what's funny about being called the richest person in the world? People assume that title comes with answers. Like somewhere between your first billion and your 100th billion, someone hands you a manual that explains what it all means, what wealth actually buys, what it doesn't, what problems it solves, and what problems it creates. Nobody does that. And the truth is, money is the most overrated solution to life's problems that exists. Don't get me wrong, it solves a lot. But the one problem it can't touch, that's the one that keeps you up at night. Let me be clear about something first. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that having money is harder than not having money. That would be insulting and stupid. Poverty is brutal. Financial stress is real. Not knowing if you can pay rent or feed your kids or afford healthcare, that's legitimate suffering. I've been broke. I've slept on couches, showered at the IMCA. I know what it's like to check your bank account and feel your stomach drop. So when I talk about what money doesn't solve, I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm just telling you what nobody told me. Here's what money actually solves: the immediate survival problems. You never have to worry about food, shelter, healthcare. Those stresses just disappear. Those stresses just disappear. And that's not nothing. That's huge. It solves the freedom problem. You can do what you want, when you want, how you want. Nobody can tell you no based on cost. You want to start a company? Done. You want to buy a house? Done. You want to travel anywhere in the world? Done. It solves the options problem. Every door is open. Every opportunity is available. You're never stuck because of money. It solves the security problem for your family. Your kids will never struggle financially. They'll have every educational opportunity. Every advantage. They're set for life before they can even walk. That's a weight off your shoulders that most parents carry forever. It solves the impact problem. You can fund research, support causes, build things that actually matter. You can move the needle on problems that affect millions of people. That's not a small thing. That's the kind of leverage most people never get. But here's what it doesn't solve. It doesn't solve the meaning problem. Having money doesn't tell you what to do with your life. It doesn't give you purpose. In fact, it can make the purpose question harder because you can't use financial necessity as an excuse anymore. When you're broke, your purpose is clear. Survive, provide, build stability. When you're wealthy, you have to actually figure out what matters to you beyond survival. And that's harder than it sounds. Doesn't solve the connection problem. This is the big one. Money doesn't buy genuine human connection. I know that sounds like a cliche, like something people say to make themselves feel better. But it's true in ways that are hard to explain until you experience it. When you have significant wealth, every relationship gets complicated. Every new person you meet, you have to wonder, do they like me, or do they like what I can do for them? Do they want to know me, or do they want access to my resources, my network, my platform? And it's not always obvious. People aren't walking around with signs that say, I'm using you. Most people probably don't even consciously realize they're doing it. They genuinely believe they like you. But there's this underlying current in every interaction where your wealth is part of the equation. It's in the room. It affects how people talk to you, what they ask you, how they position themselves. You start to feel like you're never just talking to someone as a person. You're talking to them as a symbol, as an opportunity, as a means to something. It doesn't solve the trust problem. Once you have money, trust becomes exponentially more complicated. Business partners, employees, friends, romantic interests, even family members, the dynamic shifts. You start asking yourself questions you never had to ask before. Is this person in my life because of who I am or what I have? Would they still be here if I lost it all tomorrow? And the worst part is, you can never really know You can guess, you can hope, but you can never be certain. It doesn't solve the time problem. This is one people don't talk about enough. Money can buy you almost anything except more time. And the way most people get significant money is by trading massive amounts of time. You work 80, 90, 100-hour weeks for years. You miss your kids growing up. You miss moments with people you love. You sacrifice your 20s, your 30s, sometimes your 40s, building and grinding and pushing. And yeah, you might end up wealthy. You can't buy those years back. You can't buy back your daughter's first steps that you missed because you were in a meeting. And you can't buy back the relationship that fell apart because you were never present. It doesn't solve the identity problem. When your entire life becomes about building wealth or building companies that create wealth, your sense of self gets tangled up in it. You become Elon Musk, the billionaire, or Elon Musk, the CEO, instead of just Elon. And the scary part is, you start to forget who you are without those labels. What do you like? What makes you happy outside of work? What would you do if you couldn't work anymore? These should be simple questions, but they're not when your identity has been consumed by your pursuit of success. It doesn't solve the satisfaction problem. You'd think achieving massive financial success would feel satisfying, and maybe it does for a minute, but then the goalpost moves. Because humans aren't wired to stay satisfied, we're wired to keep wanting more. So you hit 1 billion and it feels good briefly, then you're chasing 10 billion. You achieve that, then it's about market cap, or influence, or legacy. The finish line keeps moving. And money doesn't fix that treadmill. If anything, it makes it worse because you have the resources to keep chasing indefinitely. It doesn't solve the loneliness problem. This is the one that surprised me the most. I thought having resources would mean having people around, having connection, having community. And sure, you can have people around. You can fill your calendar with meetings and dinners and events, but that's not the same as not being lonely. Loneliness isn't about the absence of people. It's about the absence of real connection. It's about being in a room full of people and still feeling fundamentally alone because nobody is really seeing you. They're seeing the public version, the successful version, the version they can benefit from being associated with. Let me tell you about a specific moment that made this all click for me. I was at this event, some gala or conference, surrounded by incredibly impressive people. CEOs, celebrities, politicians, people who have achieved extraordinary things. And we're all making small talk, networking, doing the social dance. And I'm standing there with a glass of whatever in my hand, and I suddenly realize I don't know anyone here. Not really. They know my name, my companies, my net worth, probably. I know their accomplishments. But we don't actually know each other as human beings. And then I started thinking about my actual life. Who could I call at 3 in the morning if I was struggling? Not because I needed business advice or a favor. Just because I needed to talk to someone who gives a shit about me as a person. And the list was disturbingly short. Maybe non-existent if I'm being honest, because I've spent decades building companies and accumulating resources and optimizing systems. But I haven't built a life with deep human connections. I haven't invested in friendships the way I've invested in businesses. And you can't just buy that back. You can't write a check for genuine friendship or love or intimacy. Here's another thing money doesn't solve: the criticism problem. If anything, money makes criticism worse. Everyone thinks they know better. You're simultaneously too ambitious and not ambitious enough, too involved and too hands-off, too vocal and too quiet. You can't win. And sure, you can say, I don't care what people think And I've said that plenty of times. But that's not entirely true. Nobody is immune to criticism, especially when it's relentless and public and often deeply personal. It doesn't solve the pressure problem. Money actually increases pressure in weird ways. When you're broke, the pressure is to survive. When you're wealthy, the pressure is to maintain, to grow, to not screw up publicly, to live up to expectations. You have employees depending on you, investors depending on you, the public watching every move. One wrong decision doesn't just affect you, it affects thousands of people. That weight doesn't go away with money. It multiplies. It doesn't solve the relationship problem. I've been married multiple times. I have several kids from different relationships, and I love my children more than anything in this world. But my track record with romantic relationships is not good. And money didn't help. If anything, it complicated things. Because how do you separate someone loving you from someone loving your lifestyle? How do you know if they'd stay if you lost everything? How do you maintain a partnership when your work demands 80 hours a week and you're mentally somewhere else, even when you're physically present? I've had relationships end because I couldn't be present. Because I was always thinking about the next problem, the next launch, the next crisis. Because I treated relationships like another system to optimize instead of a human experience to actually live in. And you can't buy your way out of that. You can't throw money at emotional unavailability and fix it. You have to actually do the work of being present, being vulnerable, being a partner. And that's work I haven't been good at. It doesn't solve the health problem in the way you'd think. Sure, you can afford the best doctors, the best treatments, the best everything. But money doesn't buy you time to sleep. It doesn't buy you stress-free living. It doesn't undo the damage of decades of overwork and poor habits. I've probably taken years off my life from stress alone. And all the money in the world can't buy those years back. It doesn't solve the happiness problem. This is the most obvious one, but it's still worth saying, because people don't really believe it until they experience it. Money doesn't make you happy. It removes certain sources of unhappiness, which is different. Being able to pay your bills without stress is better than not being able to. But beyond that baseline of security and comfort, more money doesn't equal more happiness. Study after study shows this, but we don't want to believe it because we're all chasing that next level, thinking it'll be the one that finally brings satisfaction. Literally anything. And what, any house, any toy, any experience, and you know what? After a while, it all feels the same. The novelty wears off fast. A $10 million house doesn't make you 10 times happier than a $1 million house. A private jet is convenient, but it doesn't change your internal state. These things are nice. I'm not pretending they're not. But they're not the answer to the deeper questions. Am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Am I living a life that matters? Here's what I think the one problem is that money can't solve. The problem of meaning. What does all of this actually mean? Why am I doing any of this? But when I'm on my deathbed, what am I going to wish I had done differently? And money doesn't answer those questions. Success doesn't answer those questions. Building companies that change the world doesn't even answer those questions. Because meaning isn't something you build externally. It's something you cultivate internally. And I've spent so much time building external things that I've neglected the internal work. The problem money can't solve is the problem of being known, really known. Not known as Elon Musk, the guy who built Tesla and SpaceX, but known as the person underneath all that. The person with fears and insecurities and doubts. The person who doesn't always have the answers. The person who sometimes feels lost, despite appearing to have it all figured out. Money can buy you fame, but it can't buy you being truly seen and accepted for who you actually are. It can't solve the problem of presence, of being here now in this moment, fully engaged with life as it's happening instead of always thinking 3 steps ahead. I've spent years living in the future, planning, strategizing, building toward the next thing, and I've missed the present. I've missed the moments that actually make up a life. The quiet conversations, the simple joys, the connection that happens when you're not trying to optimize or achieve anything, when you're just being. It can't solve the problem of enough. When is enough enough? How much is sufficient? What's the number where you can stop and just be satisfied? Money doesn't answer that because there is no number. The goalpost keeps moving. You think if you just get to X amount or Y level of success, then you'll be satisfied. Man, you never are. There's always another mountain to climb. And money fuels that endless climb. It doesn't give you permission to stop. Let me tell you something else money can't fix. It can't fix your childhood. Whatever happened to you growing up, whatever wounds you carry, whatever patterns you develop to survive, money doesn't heal those. If anything, money can become another coping mechanism, another way to avoid dealing with your actual issues. You can bury yourself in work, in achievement, in accumulation, and tell yourself you're fine because you're successful. But success and healing are 2 different things. I've realized over the years that a lot of my drive comes from a place of trying to prove something to myself, to others, to critics, to people who doubted me, and you can prove them all wrong. You can become the richest person on earth. But that validation doesn't fill the hole it's supposed to fill, because the hole isn't really about external validation. It's about something deeper, something money can't touch. Money can't solve the problem of your inner critic. That voice in your head that says you're not good enough, you haven't done enough, you need to do more, achieve more, be more. That voice doesn't care about your bank account, it cares about your achievements, so let's find a reason why you're insufficient. And you can't pay it to shut up. You have to actually do the psychological work to quiet it. Therapy, meditation, self-reflection, whatever your path is. But it requires internal work, not external success. It can't solve the problem of control. When you're someone who builds things, who makes things happen, who bends reality to your will through sheer force of effort and intelligence, you get used to being in control. You get used to problems being solvable if you just think hard enough or work hard enough. But life isn't like that. People aren't like that. Relationships aren't engineering problems you can optimize. Emotions aren't code you can debug. And money doesn't change that fundamental reality that some things are outside your control. That's been one of the hardest lessons for me. Accepting that I can't control everything, that I can't fix every problem, that some things I just have to feel and experience and move through without being able to engineer a solution. Money gives you the illusion of control because you can solve so many problems with it. But the problems that actually matter, the human problems, those require surrender, not control. And money can't solve the expectations problem. When you're wealthy and successful, everyone expects you to have it all figured out. You're supposed to be happy, fulfilled, wise, balanced. You're not allowed to struggle or doubt or feel lost because you have resources. People will literally say, "What do you have to complain about?" And they're not entirely wrong from an external perspective. But internal experience doesn't work that way. You can have everything and still feel empty. You can achieve everything and still feel unfulfilled. And the expectation that you shouldn't feel that way just adds another layer of isolation. It can't solve the legacy question. What are you leaving behind? What will people remember you for? Will it matter? Money lets you build big things, visible things, things with your name on them. But is that legacy? Or is legacy about the lives you touched, the people you loved, the human moments of real connection? I've built companies that will outlast me. But what about relationships? What about being present for my kids? What about being someone people could count on, not for what I could do, but for who I was? Here's something nobody warned me about. The more successful you become, the harder it is to have normal experiences. You can't just go to a coffee shop and sit. You can't browse a bookstore without being approached. You can't have a quiet dinner without phones coming out. Privacy becomes a luxury money you can't fully buy back. And you lose something in that. You lose the ability to just be anonymous, to just be a regular person having a regular day. Everything becomes managed, scheduled, protected, and that protection also isolates you. Money can't solve the problem of staying grounded. When everyone around you is telling you how brilliant you are, how amazing everything you touch is, you start to believe it. You start to lose perspective. You start to think your way is the only way. Your vision is the only vision. Your ideas are the only ideas worth pursuing. Money amplifies that because you have the resources to prove you're right, to force your vision into reality. But that doesn't mean you actually are right. It just means you have the leverage to make your version win. I've made decisions I was absolutely certain were correct that turned out to be wrong. I've pushed strategies I thought were brilliant that failed. I've hurt people because I was so convinced I knew better. And having money meant I could ignore dissenting voices longer, push harder, bulldoze through resistance. That's not always a good thing. Sometimes the resistance is valid. Sometimes the dissent is wise. But when you're used to being right and having the resources to prove it, you stop listening. And that's dangerous. It can't solve the grief problem. Loss is loss. Whether you're rich or poor, when someone you love dies, when a relationship ends, when something you cared about is gone, that pain is the same. Money doesn't cushion that blow. It doesn't make grief shorter or easier. You'll still have to feel it, process it, move through it. And in some ways, having money makes it harder because people expect you to just move on. You have resources, you have options, you should be fine. But grief doesn't work that way. I've lost relationships. I've lost versions of myself. And money didn't help with any of that. The only thing that helps is time and allowing yourself to actually feel it instead of burying it under work or achievement or the next goal. But I'm not good at that. I'm much better moving forward at finding the next problem to solve. Sitting with grief, with loss, with sadness, that requires a different skill set. One I've never developed. Money can't solve the addiction problem. If we're being honest about what addiction really is, I'm not talking about substances necessarily, though those are real. I'm talking about behavioral addiction, workaholism, achievement. The need to constantly be building, creating, pushing, proving. That's an addiction as real as any drug, and money doesn't solve it. Money enables it. It gives you the resources to keep feeding that addiction indefinitely. I'm addicted to building, to creating, to pushing boundaries, and that's created incredible things, but it's also cost me in ways I'm only now starting to understand. Because when you're addicted to achievement, rest feels like failure, presence feels like waste, connection feels like distraction. And you end up living a life that's impressive on paper, but empty in experience. Money didn't cause that addiction, but it certainly didn't solve it. It can't solve the forgiveness problem. Forgiving others who've wronged you, forgiving yourself for your mistakes, Money doesn't make that easier. If anything, success can make you harder, less forgiving, because you think if you could figure out how to build billion-dollar companies, other people should be able to figure out their issues too. But life doesn't work that way. People are complicated. Situations are nuanced. And holding on to resentment or guilt doesn't serve anyone, regardless of your bank account. I've been betrayed by business partners, by people I trusted. I've also betrayed people in my own ways, maybe not intentionally, but through absence, through prioritizing work over relationships, through not being who I said I'd be. And money doesn't help you work through that. Therapy helps. Time helps. Honest self-reflection. But those require something money can't buy. The willingness to be uncomfortable and vulnerable. Here's what I'm starting to understand. The one problem money can't solve is the problem of integration, of integrating all the different parts of yourself. Integrating all the different parts of yourself into a coherent whole. The ambitious part and the human part, the builder and the person, the public figure and the private self. Money lets you compartmentalize. You can be the CEO at work and try to be someone different at home. But that split takes a toll. Eventually, you realize you've become fragmented. Well, coming whole again requires work that has nothing to do with wealth. It's the problem of authenticity, of being genuinely yourself in all contexts, not just performing different roles, depending on what's required. Money makes performance easier because you have resources to manage your image, control your narrative, present the version of yourself you want people to see. But underneath all that performance, who are you actually? Oh, strip away the achievements, the wealth, the companies, the public persona, what's left? That's a scary question to ask. And money doesn't help you answer it. Let me tell you what I've learned that I wish I'd known earlier. Money is a tool, a powerful one. It can do enormous good. It can solve real problems, but it's not the answer to being human. It's not the answer to what makes life meaningful. The things that actually matter, genuine connection, love, presence, purpose, inner peace, those require different work. They require you to stop optimizing and start feeling. To stop achieving and start being. To stop performing and start connecting. If I could go back and talk to my younger self, the one who was just starting out, hungry and ambitious and ready to change the world, here's what I'd say. Chase your dreams, absolutely. Build your company. Make your impact, but don't forget to build a life too. Don't forget to invest in relationships with the same intensity you invest in businesses. Don't forget that being present with someone you love is as important as being present at a product launch. Don't forget that success and fulfillment are not the same thing. I tell him that money will solve a lot of problems, but not the most important one. The most important problem is figuring out how to be a whole, integrated, present human being who can achieve things without losing themselves in the achievement. How to be ambitious without being consumed. How to build without sacrificing connection. How to have resources without letting them define you. The one problem money can't solve is the problem of living a complete life. Not just a successful life, not just a wealthy life, but a life that has depth and meaning and connection and presence. A life where you're not just doing impressive things, but actually experiencing life as it happens. Where you're not just building a legacy, but living in a way that the people closest to you actually want to remember. And I'm still figuring that out. Still learning. Still making mistakes. Still hoping it's not too late to course correct. Because at the end of the day, I can fund missions to Mars, but I can't buy back the time I've missed with my kids. I can build companies worth hundreds of billions, but I can't purchase genuine intimacy. I can achieve things most people dream about, but I can't engineer my way into inner peace. That's the one problem money can't solve, and it's the most important one. So, if you're out there chasing wealth, thinking it'll fix everything, I hope you hear this. Build your wealth, if that's your goal, but don't do it at the cost of your humanity. Don't sacrifice the things money can't buy for the things it can, because you might reach the top and realize you climbed the wrong mountain. And all the money in the world can't move mountains once you've already climbed them.